We'd like to welcome each and every individual to Voices of Integrity with Police and Law Enforcement. On this podcast is different in that it shares things that you won't find in any other podcast. Just saying. If you know somebody in law enforcement, for sure, pass this along to them because it will help them understand a lot of things that are not trained in the police academy. And we have Kenny on with us today, and he's 23 years old, and he's was raised Amish, and thought about actually becoming a police officer. Kenny, why did you think about becoming a police officer?
I think the biggest thing for me um, was probably I like to help people, and I think from my perspective, it's just that would be that's the people. Like if you need help, if you need somebody, you call the police, and then you could show up and help people out, make people's day go better, and just overall be there to help somebody out. And I think that would be the biggest thing for me.
It'd be interesting to get Ken MacArthur on, uh, because he was a police officer for a number of years, I believe. It'd be interesting to get Jim Bontrager on, and a number of other Denny Rogers and a number of other people in or police or in law enforcement. Chief Doug Reiner, that would be interesting to go ahead and get him on to get the input from people on on this. If you haven't joined the Life GPS mobile app, I'd encourage you to do that. Just click on that and you'll jump in and join there. And that's that'll tell you your personality in 17 seconds. Like once you identify your personality, which can be done in 17 seconds, based on the geometric psychology test and the pain quadrant test through Life Masteries Institute, which is a nonprofit organization. Once you identify your personality, your strengths, weaknesses, what you like, what you don't, turns people on, turns people off. It is absolutely magical what you can tell. Now, what's neat about this is that you can actually, based on how somebody says hello to you, you can tell what personality they are. So this in law enforcement is like you've never experienced anything like this, where it's so fast in what it will do to bring value. And so what we'll do in these podcasts is we'll go through and each podcast will focus in on a specific personality. And then you can also share, in the website here, you can share, questions or, what questions do you have or experiences, or if you know somebody would be a great guest to have on this podcast. We'd love to have guests in this. And so for sure, you'll want to do that. So let's dive in. And so which of these four shapes would you tend to like the most? A cube, a pyramid, wavy line, or ball? First, second, third, and fourth. And then which of these four things would cause you the most frustration in any area of your life? Things being out of order, out of control, boring or not fun, and then conflict with others. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now, once we do this, there's four major personalities like there are in a lot of the tests like Myers-Briggs and DISC, and there's thousands of them out there. Through Life Masteries Institute, it's very unique. It's very different. There's nothing out there I've ever experienced, and I've been studying this for over 30 years, that's anything like it. It's fast. It's really efficient. And when you look at primary and secondary, there's 16. When you look at 3 levels, there's 64. You look at 4 levels, there's 256. If you look at the combination between the geo and the paint quadrant test, there's 65,536 possible combinations. So, but don't worry, you just learn 4, and then you just keep growing and keep benefiting from that. I've been blessed to be an international speaker and author. I'm writing my 18th book right now with Elaine Yoder, who's just down, a neighbor of ours just down the street. She and her husband have 5 kids, and it's Clean Windows, learning to see things we can't see. So looking for a co-author. You actually don't have to write anything. Just talk to me or one of my associates for 15 minutes a week. So somebody in law enforcement that 15 minutes a week, and we'd co-author a book, Clean Windows for police, or Clean Windows for law enforcement. So if you know somebody, if you're interested, or somebody else, again, you don't have to write anything. You don't have to be a good writer. You don't have to be a good speaker. Just an experienced in law enforcement. Love to write that book with you, co-author that book with you. So if you chose the ball or conflict with others, we'd refer to that person as an amiable personality. So maybe one of your greatest strengths is your concern, compassion for people. Maybe one of your weaknesses might be your concern, compassion for people. So that a lot of people in law enforcement are going to be the amiable personality, like Kenny is. So very caring, a very caring person, very loyal. Um, you know, they they connect with people well, and so a lot of people in law enforcement are that. You chose the cube or out of order. That would be an analytic personality. So one of your greatest strengths is like to dot your I's, cross your T's, make sure things are done properly in order. A lot of people in law enforcement are this as well. A lot of them are going to be this, the analytic personality. Um, if you test out, if you chose the pyramid or out of control, you'd be a driver personality. A lot of people in leadership in law enforcement and policing is going to be the driver personality. So one of their greatest strengths is their drive, assertiveness. They make things happen. One of their weaknesses might be their drive, assertiveness. They make things happen. So our greatest strength is our greatest weakness, and our greatest weakness is just our greatest strength. Misapplied is taking a strength and carrying it too far. Another strength, if you chose the wavy line, one of your greatest strengths might be your energy, excitement, enthusiasm. Weakness might be energy, excitement, and enthusiasm. So again, our greatest strength, greatest weakness. Now, let's focus on the amiable personality. The amiable personality, if you chose the ball or conflict with others first, okay, and you chose the cube second, you'd be what we call an amiable analytic personality. And so the analytic amiable personality, when we combine these together, the combined strength of both of these is one of your greatest strengths is your tenacity, probably. Like once you set your mind to do something, you do it. One of your weaknesses might be you might go ahead and be a bit stubborn. And um, my mom, I remember my dad had been married for 50 years, and I was talking to her one day, and I said, "Mom, my dad was an amiable analytic, so he's a pastor. Um, he could have been a police officer too. Same type of thing, right? Like caring for people." And I said to my mom, I said, "Mom, man, Dad drives me crazy. He's so stubborn." She's like, "He's not stubborn." I'm like, "Really, Mom? Like you've been married for 50 years and you don't think he's stubborn?" "Okay, Mom, if that's working for you, that's awesome." And after I hung up, I felt bad because I'm like, boy, I hope I didn't mess up their marriage. And then a few days later, she called me up and she said, we were just across town. She called me up and said, "Mark, you know what? Your dad is stubborn." So the amiable is an interesting personality. They're a natural chameleon. So whichever people they're around, they'll tend to emulate that personality. Um, and so an amiable analytic, one of their greatest strengths is going to be their tenacity. Weaknesses is stubbornness, and they have a lot of data to back up their stubbornness. So it's bedrock concrete. you can't move them. Now, most of the time, don't get me wrong. Like it's funny when I do, seminars and events all around the world where I can tell the amiables in the room, they're like, I'm not stubborn. Like, I am not stubborn. I'm like, okay, you're not stubborn. I get it. I understand it. Um, and so the amiable is actually the most stubborn of all four personalities. But what's interesting about it is most of the time they don't care. Where do you want to go to eat? I don't care. So they're pleasers of other people. So I think 80, 90, 95% of the time, they don't care. Like they'll just go with the flow wherever it is. But boy, they get their mindset on something. It is bedrock concrete. It doesn't move. Like, so I'm a driver analytic. So I'm a driver analytic. I'm a pyramid and a cube. My wife is an amiable analytic, amiable expressive, double amiable. And so, if you were to meet my wife, you'd say she's the nicest person in the world. And she is. We've been married for 39 years. We tend to like other people who are like us, and we tend to fall in love with people who are opposite of us. So one of the biggest challenges in law enforcement are going to be relationships. Other challenges are going to be substance abuse, anger, violence. There's just pressure, stress. Maybe Kenny can get Jim Bontrager, and that guy knows so much about law enforcement. It's unbelievable. So, and just the brain science behind it, and when we understand, you know, there is something we'll be covering something on mental illnesses, so mental health. And so each of the four personalities have mental health issues in specific areas. Like the amiable is going to have, their biggest overall is fear. And so panic attack, passive aggressive stress, PTSD, anxiety, and social phobias. And so based on the personality, we can see what kind of mental health. And so we hope, Kenny and I hope, that this is going to impact law enforcement all around the world. Actually. Now, if you chose the ball and the pyramid, then you'd be what referred to as an amiable driver personality. And so one of your greatest strengths as a driver would be your drive assertiveness. You make things happen. One of your weaknesses would be your drive assertiveness. You make things happen. When they cross over kitty corner to this, you're going to have a lot of inner conflict. And so you care about people, but you see people's potential. And so you might try to care for them. And then if they don't respond, then you get aggressive. So this would be passive aggressive. This type of personality would be passive aggressive, which normally in today's society is a negative thing, but it's not necessarily negative. You go passive, and if that doesn't work, you go aggressive. So, right, great for law enforcement. Like, hey, let's de-escalate this situation. Let's bring it down. So they're great at passive, and if they need to, they can go aggressive. They prefer not somebody down or put them in jail or harm them physically because they're a threat to somebody else, but they're willing to do that. And so they're passive aggressive. And so so if that doesn't work, they'll run them over, apologize for running him over, and then run them over again. When we talk about the driver, we'll talk about the different, each time we talk about these. So if you're an amiable, there's a high statistical probability that your spouse will be a driver personality. It's not always the case, but it's often the case. Definitely in law enforcement, get your spouse involved in these and go through these because they will understand you better and you will understand yourself better and you will understand them better. And that just makes for some amazing, for an amazing marriage. And so good stuff there. There's also a podcast for marriages, which is neat. And we'll be talking specifically, though, in this podcast about marriages in law enforcement because it's different. It just is. So, most of the police officers are going to be men. So they're going to have wives that are home. And so every day, the wife and the kids wonder if their dad's going to come home alive today. I mean, maybe not consciously, or maybe consciously, but definitely that puts strain on the marriage and the kids. And so we're going to have some really interesting conversations about that. And so there's going to be inner conflict. Like you want to drive things forward, but then you're going to, so you feel bad about running them over. Like I'm an analytic driver or a driver analytic. So I'll run somebody over and not feel bad. Like they determine like, lead, follow, get out of the way. I'll explain why they deserve to be run over. Like, so people don't like me. But the amiable, most everybody likes the amiable in large part because they tell people what they want to hear, which is not necessarily a bad thing to do, but it can be a bad thing because, again, our greatest strength is our greatest weakness. And then the amiable, expressive personality, that'd be a double portion of people. And so you'd be fun, funny. So kind of a jokester. So one of your greatest strengths as an expressive would be your energy, excitement, enthusiasm. So you're a people person. So if you're that type of personality, boy, you're probably going to hate reports and hate data and hate, the paperwork and hate all of that. But you're funny. And you're very, very powerful. Because people are going to like you. So you can de-escalate situations by being caring or loving or by being funny. Like you get away with things that nobody else can get away with. Like I get in so much trouble being a driver analytic, but if you have the expressive, you can say things that everybody else around you is envious and saying, how do you get away with saying that? Like that's just crazy. So again, we'll be covering these. Hopefully this was helpful. Invite other people, that you work with, your peers. Definitely get your wife and your kids. We'll have specific sections in here for children of law enforcement. And talking about that, we'll talk about families and not only relationships, with marriage. We'll talk about TJJS, which is Tarzan Jane Jungle Sex. So amazing because of all of the pressure that's there. There's a lot of pressure. And so having a really awesome marriage and having when there's so much stress, your sex life can be so much more amazing. So we'll have some really interesting resources and guests on too. So for sure, if you'd like to participate in this yourself and be a guest or of others, for sure, go ahead and do that. Connect with us. If you, Kenny, do you have any questions or thoughts on this? What we went through today?
No, I don't.
So it's pretty interesting that, a young Amish guy who thought about being a police officer, um, potentially is going to impact, well, he will through this podcast, he will impact police officers literally all around the world. I believe through an understanding of personalities and natural laws and some of the other things we're going through, that he will literally save people's lives. He will literally transform people's marriages. And so share this with other people because they'll find it to be most interesting. If you have any questions on anything that's covered, connect with the individual who invited you to participate in today's session, or you can call toll free 888-230-2300 outside the US 630-393-9909. And always remember, we can accomplish so much more together than we ever could on our own. Have an amazing day. Bye-bye.